Imagine you're presenting a major television program. The cameras are rolling, you're in full flow discussing the issues of the day, and then suddenly, breaking news alert, red banner across the screen, urgent update, the kind of interruption that only happens when something genuinely massive has just gone down. Now imagine that breaking news is yet another humiliation for the Prime Minister, broadcast live for the entire nation to witness. That's exactly what happened on GB News when Ellie Costello had to halt the show mid-program to announce that Donald Trump has just suspended a $31 billion tech deal with Britain. Live, on air, in real time. The collective intake of breath you could probably hear from space. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, and today we're unpacking the moment Keir Starmer's day went from bad to absolutely catastrophic, broadcast in glorious high definition for everyone to see. Because if there's one thing more painful than political failure, it's political failure that interrupts daytime television with a breaking news klaxon. Let's dive in. Right, so let's set the scene properly, because this is genuinely extraordinary stuff. GB News is doing its thing. Presenters chatting, political editor Christopher Hope probably mid-analysis about something or other, and then boom, Ellie Costello gets to tap in her earpiece. Breaking news, stop everything. And what's the news? The Telegraph is reporting that President Trump has suspended the Atlantic Declaration tech deal, $31 billion worth of cooperation on artificial intelligence, nuclear energy, and quantum computing. The White House has literally pulled the plug, citing Britain's slow progress. Not diplomatic language like ongoing discussions or mutual review. Nope, slow progress. That's diplomatic speak for you're useless and we're done waiting. And this wasn't some quiet briefing to journalists. This was public, immediate, and delivered with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. Christopher Hope's reaction tells you everything you need to know. He immediately tries to soften the blow. Maybe it's a negotiation tactic. These things happen in trade talks. But then he can't help himself. He says the word, disaster. This is a disaster. And he's absolutely right, because this deal wasn't some minor agreement about importing cheese or exporting woolly jumpers. This was supposed to be the entire point of Brexit Britain, the reason we left the EU, the reason we supposedly wanted regulatory freedom was so we could do exactly these kinds of cutting-edge technology partnerships with global players like America. If we can't even close a deal with our closest ally, our so-called special relationship partner, then what was the point of any of it? Hope basically says it out loud. This is why we left the EU, to do these deals. And now we're failing at the one thing we were supposed to be good at. Ouch. But it gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. Ellie Costello then drops the context bomb. The White House isn't just annoyed about slow progress in general. They've got specific grievances. They're furious about Britain's Online Safety Act and our digital services tax. Now, the digital services tax is basically a levy on big tech companies. Google, Facebook, Amazon, all the Silicon Valley giants. It's supposed to make sure they pay their fair share in the UK instead of routing all their profits through Ireland or Luxembourg. Sounds reasonable, right? Except from America's perspective, it's a targeted attack on American companies. It's protectionism dressed up as fairness. And Trump, being Trump, is not having it. He sees it as Britain punishing American businesses while begging for American investment. You can't have it both ways. You can't tax our companies into oblivion and then expect us to pour billions into your economy. That's not how deals work. Then there's the Online Safety Act, which is this massive piece of legislation that's supposed to protect children and vulnerable people from harmful content online. Noble goal, right? Keep kids safe from the horrors of the internet, crack down on harmful material, make platforms accountable. The problem is the Americans see it as censorship. They see it as the British government trying to police the entire internet, forcing companies to monitor and remove content in ways that violate free speech principles. Christopher Hope basically admits this on air. It's seen over there as censorious. He tries to defend it by saying everyone wants to protect children, which is true, but then he asks the killer question. Why are we policing everything on the internet this new way? It's the legislative equivalent of bringing a sledgehammer to a job that needed a scalpel, and now it's torpedoed a $31 billion deal. So let's zoom out for a second and look at what this really means. Keir Starmer has been Prime Minister for just over a year and a half, and in that time he's managed to alienate the British public, his polling is in the toilet, and now he's alienated America. The special relationship, the foundation of British foreign policy since World War II, is in tatters. Trump doesn't trust him. Trump doesn't think Britain under Starmer is a credible partner, and Trump is publicly demonstrating that by suspending this deal in the most high-profile way possible. This wasn't the quiet diplomatic cable. This was announced to the press, picked up by the Telegraph, and then broadcast live on GB News with a breaking news alert. That's not an accident. That's a message. Trump is telling the world that Britain is not serious, not reliable, not worth doing business with right now. And the timing couldn't be worse for Starmer. He's already dealing with an economy that's flatlining, businesses fleeing the country because of tax hikes, unemployment rising, his own backbenchers grumbling, and polling numbers that would make Liz Truss blush. Now he's got this, another massive, undeniable failure that he can't spin his way out of. You can't blame this on the Tories. You can't blame this on 14 years of conservative government. This is squarely on him. His policies, his approach, his inability to navigate the most important diplomatic relationship Britain has. And it's been announced live on television, interrupting regular programming with political editors calling it a disaster in real time. You literally could not script a worse day at the office. Now, let's talk about what the viewers thought, because the reaction on social media was absolutely savage. One person on X said Trump is about to rinse the BBC and then punishes our pathetic piece of shit PM by suspending a mega tech deal. Brilliant. Strong words, but they capture the mood. There's a sense among a lot of people that Starmer deserves this, that he's been incompetent, that he's prioritized all the wrong things, and now he's reaping what he sowed. Another commenter said Labour claimed to be the adults, but the entire cabinet is just a bunch of work experience kids. Time for them to step aside. Brutal, but again, it reflects a wider frustration. Starmer ran on being competent, stable, the adult in the room after years of Tory chaos. Instead, he's delivered more chaos just with a different color rosette. And then there's the BBC angle, which is fascinating. Multiple people are pointing out that Trump is going after the BBC for its coverage of him, and they're linking that to the suspended deal. The argument goes like this. British media, particularly the BBC, has been relentlessly negative about Trump. Fair or not, that's created friction. Trump is a man who holds grudges, who responds to criticism with retaliation, and who sees media coverage as part of a broader political game. If he thinks British state broadcaster is out to get him, he's going to factor that into his decisions about whether to do business with Britain. Is that fair? Is that how international relations should work? Probably not, but it's how they do work when Trump is involved. And Starmer should have known that. He should have been managing that relationship, smoothing over tensions, making sure Trump felt respected and valued. Instead, he seems to have done the opposite. The mention of question time is interesting too. Multiple commenters are saying you only have to watch question time to see the problem. The implication being that British political discussion has become so one-sided, so dismissive of certain viewpoints that it's alienating potential partners. Whether you agree with that or not, the perception matters. If America looks at British media and sees nothing but hostility toward Trump and everything he represents, that affects the relationship. Diplomacy isn't just about what politicians say in meetings. It's about the entire ecosystem. Media coverage, public opinion, cultural signals, and right now, Britain is sending all the wrong signals. Christopher Hope's point about this being a negotiation tactic is worth exploring. It's true that in big trade talks, parties sometimes walk away or threaten to walk away to gain leverage. You say the deal's off, the other side panics, and suddenly they're more willing to make concessions. Is that what Trump is doing here? Maybe. He's certainly done it before, threatened to pull out of deals, imposed tariffs, created chaos, and then swoop back in with a new agreement once everyone's sufficiently rattled. But here's the problem. Even if this is a tactic, it's working. Britain looks weak. Starmer looks desperate. The longer this goes on, the more damage it does to Britain's reputation. And if Starmer ends up making concessions to get the deal back on track, he's going to look even worse, like he got bullied into submission by Trump. There's no good outcome here. Either the deal stays dead and Britain loses $31 billion worth of investment, or Starmer caves and looks pathetic. Pick your poison. Let's talk about the Online Safety Act in more detail because it's at the heart of this mess. The legislation requires social media platforms to remove illegal content and protect children from harmful material. Sounds great, right? The problem is defining what counts as harmful, who decides, and how platforms are supposed to enforce it. The act gives the government sweeping powers to regulate online content, and from a free speech perspective, that's terrifying. American tech companies are looking at this and thinking, we're being asked to censor content based on British government guidelines. We're being threatened with massive fines if we don't comply, and we're essentially being turned into arms of the state. That's not a business environment they want to operate in. And Trump, whatever else you think of him, is a free speech absolutist when it suits him. He sees this legislation and thinks Britain has gone full Orwell, so he's pulling the deal. The digital services tax is the other sticking point. Britain introduced this tax to make sure big tech companies pay their fair share. The problem is it's seen internationally as discriminatory. It specifically targets digital companies, most of which are American. From the UK perspective, it's about tax fairness. These companies make billions in revenue from British users and should contribute to British public services. From the American perspective, it's a protectionist measure designed to punish successful American businesses. And Trump, being Trump, is not having it. He sees it as Britain punishing American businesses while begging for American investment. You can't have it both ways. You can't tax our companies into oblivion and then expect us to pour billions